Hey, welcome to episode 8 of our Admiral 69M5, which belongs to our good friend Larry. So we're going to start this video at the end and work our way backwards. So what you're seeing here is the radio, right there. And if you look in the background, you can see that we have our Variac right there, turned on. Let's see if I can point to that, show you. Need our pointer. Okay. So here's our Variac, right there, and we have it on. We have our radio plugged in, and we're going to turn it on. Let's see what happens. Now you'll notice that that light got bright for a second, and it went down. That's normal in a set like this without a transformer. Let's see if we get any sound. So Larry, this is the moment you've been waiting for. Grandpa's radio is going to sing. Let's turn that so we don't get a copyright.
We were told about our options and financing in detail. No pressure, just information. Installation was quick, and the CGC
there you go, it works.
was there every step of the way.
You can notice that speaker that Don fixed for us is working really well. It's right there. Can't miss it. So let's talk about how we got the radio to get to this point.
That's clean. Schedule your free water tip.
Be right back. Okay, first things first. Somebody asked about the antenna. The antenna is connected right here. There's 3 wires that come out and they slide down into these little tabs. So that's how we do that. Let's look underneath. Okay, let's start off with a little tour underneath the chassis. So you'll notice right away that here's our filter caps. They've been mounted. I think I showed you that in the last episode. And you'll notice that we have a number of new resistors. One here, and one here. There's not a lot of resistors in this thing, honestly. So I did check every one of them. And here's the way I do it. You know, I wrote down, I don't know the color codes by heart, honestly. So I wrote down the color codes, looked it up, what the value was, measured it, and then tried to figure out what does 10% look like. I had traditional resistors and I had some dog bones. And I found the ones that were way out of tolerance. For example, R1 was 14 meg and it should be 10 meg. R6 was supposed to be 250K, it was 380, and R7 was supposed to be 510 and it was 590. I've changed those. All the other ones were pretty much dead on the money. So that's why we've only replaced these 3 resistors. You'll see all the caps have been changed, all the non-polarized caps. The mica caps I haven't touched because they're good, no problem with those. And we have our rectifier tube now wired into the circuit the way it's supposed to be. So I had to run a filament line to here because obviously it was disconnected when they put in that selenium rectifier. So we've extended our filament string to this 35Z5 tube. And we had to replace a few wires here on the speaker connector. So for the most part, this radio is good. You've heard it playing now. All I have really enough to do now is clean it and do an alignment. As far as the old crumbly wires that I told you about, I didn't have to replace all of them, but I had to replace these. Take a look at this. Let's show you on a piece of white paper so you can see it. This is the problem with that experimental wire they had in 1946, 1945. It just falls apart. Matter of fact, I can just go like this and it'll probably crumble. Yeah, look at that. See that? So if you have a radio with this stuff, you either have to encapsulate it with something or replace it. Okay? In our radio, the only wires that we really had to disturb was this B+ wire here, this red wire that's coming across, and we had to do our dial light. So that's all we had to replace. The yellow ones that you see here that were originally white, those are all our filament strings, and I'm not going to disturb them. I didn't touch them, and they'll be fine. There's nothing exposed. I'll check everything one more time, obviously, before I wrap it up, but we're in good shape there. So that's what we look like underneath. So this radio is generally done and ready for use. One thing I am going to do is I am going to remove the tuning capacitor, and I'll show you why. And those of you that do this, restore radios all the time, you understand this for sure. Look how dirty that is. Let's zoom in a little bit. See how much dirt's on there? Now the radio plays, but I guarantee you it'll play much better when this is cleaner. Guaranteed. Alright, this is an easy one to remove. So there's really only 2 wires here, right there, that have to be removed. Remove the plate, the good old dial string, Bill. So we're going to do a dial string again. Wouldn't be a project without a dial string. But this is a relatively simple dial string. There's really nothing major to it. So we're going to do that. We're good to go. This connector here that comes out of the side, this actually attaches to the rectifier tube, is the 110 volt AC line that goes to the turntable. Now on some combination units like this, the power switch is a 3-position switch. It's phono, off, radio. Not this one. When you turn this one on, this is hot, regardless. The turntable itself has a switch that says on, off. So that's the difference between this radio, that the turntable always has 110 going to it. There's something on the schematic I want to show you, which is interesting, something I didn't realize until Brendan pointed it out to me. So I'm going to go through it with you. Let me zoom in. We're going to focus on our volume control. Now, if you remember, this thing had a separate pot wired into it, and primarily because the volume control wasn't working. Well, it turns out that was not the original volume control that was broken. It was another one. So the way that this thing worked originally, it was a 5-terminal volume / on-off switch. And the reason why they did that then was they included a tone stack. So basically when you turned it one way or another, you would basically add more bass. The louder you went, it would add more bass. So there was really no way to control the tone. It was just based on the volume. So what we did was we put in a traditional 1 meg pot here, and we removed a couple of components that we don't need. All right, so we removed this capacitor, we removed here, and we removed a resistor right here. So all we really did was turn this into a traditional volume control, and we have a fixed tone, which is going to be fine for what we're doing. So that's the difference in this radio that I noticed right away. And aside from that, there's really nothing else major to talk about. You know, it's a relatively simple radio, and it's good to go. So what's our next step? Well, our next step is, like I've said, we're going to clean that. We're going to clean the tuning condenser, and we're going to work on the turntable. And I want to show you the turntable. That's a whole other story. So let's do that. We shall be back. All right, here's our turntable. It's actually a really interesting one. You know, I've worked on other turntables like the Bing Crosby 461203. I've worked on those. You know, apparently this one is from the same era, but very different. And, you know, basically what do we see here? Well, let's see, we have a motor, which is really dirty, and I'm going to have to take this apart and clean it. It actually rubs because I'm having it upside down. Here's our AC connector, and you'll see here that the wires are probably broken. I haven't even tried this thing yet, to be honest. And it looks like most of this is copper, which I find really unusual why they would put copper on a turntable, but I just don't know if it's copper or it's a copper alloy. Don't know that yet. And it's got this really large gear here that turns the turntable. This is our audio connector right here. It's an RCA jack that goes to the radio. And you'll see it attaches here through a capacitor. On the schematic, it's going to be C14. Right here. That's the capacitor you're looking at, C14. It's a 0.005. We're definitely going to change that. And one thing of damage I already noticed is the tone arm wires are broken right here. Let's zoom in and show you. Now my guess is that somehow they got caught up in this gear at some point, and they just got sliced. And the other ends of them are right here. So we're going to have to rewire that. That goes to the tone arm and to the needle. I'm sure the needle's no good, but you never know with this stuff, right? So we're going to clean this thing. We have a little bit of rust here, so we're going to put some rust reformer on it and make sure that doesn't get worse. We're going to take off the motor and clean it. All these wires have to be looked at because I do see some worn insulation here. And then we're going to try this thing out. Let me flip it over so you can see the top. Real simple. So what I did on this thing, because I'm going to be working on it, I built a little stand. I haven't tried it yet. Let's see if it works. Just out of some wood, something that I can stand it up on. I just got to remember how I built it. Let's see. I think it's something like this. There we go. Let's see if that works. Cool. So let's see if we can pull this shot up a little bit. So there's our turntable. You'll see the flocking is not great, but it's not horrible. Here's our center pin. And we do have over here, let's see if we can get this in the shot. Okay, here we go. Here's our on-off and reject switch. And it looks like this is some kind of Catalan bake light, I think. Looks like it's some kind of Catalan. I don't know if it is or not. And then we have something here that was damaged in shipping, right here. This is the record stack, where you stack your records up and it releases them. The top of this came off in shipping, and I have to look and see about reattaching that. But other than that, it looks really good. The needle, there is a needle in here. No idea if it's good. I seriously doubt it. But this is what it looks like. So our next step is going to be to apply 110 volts to the motor and see if it turns, and then we'll go from there. So that's the story on this. We're going to work on the turntable next and get that back up, and you'll see that in episode 9. And we're also going to work on the cabinet. So on the cabinet, one last thing before I wrap up. I was not going to use grain filler. I didn't think the grain was deep enough, but now that I've basically stained a piece and urethaned it, this is what it looks like. So I've stained it, urethaned it, a couple of coats, and you can see here that it's not smooth. The grain is not so bad, but I'm thinking for the top of this thing I want it to be a little bit more like furniture. So I think I'm going to do some grain filler. I have to look into that though, because I know I've seen only water-based grain filler. And if I use water-based grain filler, I assume I have to use a water-based stain, but I don't really know. So I have to do some research on that and figure it out. But this is what our cabinet's going to look like when it's done, and it's pretty good, except it'll be a little smoother. So that's where we are, guys. So Larry, today you got to see the radio play. That's great. In the next episode, you're going to get to see the record player go, hopefully, assuming that the needle is good. If not, you'll see it turn. That's okay. So Ernesto's starting to smile a little bit now. He knows that we're getting close. So anyway, you guys have a great night, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Take care. Okay, really quickly, I want to just cover a safety part of this restore. So typically, as you know, these old radios had a two-prong plug, non-polarized, so you plug it in one way, the chassis is hot, you plug it in the other way, it's not. And you really have no way to know, it's a guess. So of course we replaced the cord with a three-prong cord. The wide one is your neutral, the skinny one is your hot. And the way that we wired it, I'm going to show you on this piece of paper, it'll be easier to see. So if you look at our plug, this side is hot, this side is neutral. So what we did is we took our hot side and went to the switch. We then took the other side of the switch and went to pin 2 of the 35Z5. That's our rectifier tube. So now that switch is going to break anything before anything happens. It's going to break it before the turntable is not going to work. That switch is going to kill everything. The neutral side, we went to the chassis. In this particular case, like that, and there we have a complete circuit. Now obviously pin 7 here continues off along the filament string, but we've basically put neutral to the chassis and we have the hot wired on a switch. It's essentially what we did here. So that's how we make this thing safe. and make sure that no one can get hurt. That's the bottom line. Okay? So neutral goes to the chassis, hot goes through the switch and continues along the filament string and all that. I know there's a lot of debate about this. Some people think you should do it that way. Some people think you shouldn't. Some people say put a fuse in. You could certainly put a fuse in here, and you want to fuse the hot side if you wanted to. Put a fuse in right here if you want. All right? And that would break anything before it gets to the switch. Okay? So I just want to make sure I covered that. That's how this radio's been wired, and there's no risk of any shock.